It was 1966 at a school just outside Melbourne, Westall High School and Primary, I think. And there were, according to the teacher and all the students, almost 400 people out in broad daylight. And you have this disc hovering above, doing things you shouldn't be doing. And the teacher's looking at it, the science teacher, Mr. Greenwood, looking at it. And then it comes down and lands. This general looked at me and he was like pretty much laughing in my face. He goes, "Kid, you expect us to come forward and you employ us to protect and secure our airspace and say, hey, there are craft of unknown origin displaying highly advanced technology. They don't have any wings, any tail, any visible means of propulsion. They fly rings around our fastest jets. They penetrate the most sensitive airspace on the planet. We don't know who they are, where they come from, or what they want. We have no visible means of defense against them. Shall they turn to be hostile? Thank you and good night." He goes, "Do you honestly think that we're going to tell the general public that?" He just looked at me like, "You really think that's what we're going to do?"
Hey, everybody, it's Michael Shermer. It's time for another episode of The Michael Shermer Show. My guest today is James Fox. He's the director and film producer, probably the leading voice in UFO filmmaking in space. Is behind the immensely popular films such as The Phenomenon, a comprehensive history of some of the best known and most puzzling UFO incidences worldwide. Last year, Fox released The Program, which explored the unprecedented bipartisan congressional effort to uncover what intelligence agencies really know about UFOs and UAPs. In 2022, Fox released the prequel to his latest film, Moment of Contact, which delved into what's being called the Roswell of Brazil and was lauded as one of the best UFO documentaries. Additional films from Mr. Fox include UFOs, 50 Years of Denial, Out of the Blue, and I Know What I Saw. In the new film, Moment of Contact, so the new subtitle is New Revelations of Alien Encounters, which was released just a few days ago on December 22nd. James, nice to see you. Give us a little bit of background. How did you get interested in all this? Were you a Star Trek fan or a Carl Sagan fan, or what's your avenue?
It's really funny, actually, because this is why I respect skeptics, because I myself was the biggest skeptic. And here I am, having delved into this, traveled around the world, met with witnesses, military, radar operators, fighter jet pilots. I honestly feel like I have less of an understanding today of what's going on than I did over 30 years ago. I really don't. I really don't. I know the phenomenon is real, but what are its origins and intent? I have the foggiest clue. I really do. I wish I knew. And I'm starting to get to the realization that I'm just not going to know. I'm probably never going to find out. And it's kind of frustrating.
Oh, no, I don't want to hear that. I want to know. I want you to find it and show it to me.
I thought it was going to be like, because I'll tell you, let me back up. I had a really good friend of mine, this guy, Renee Harris. We went to high school together. In fact, he went to a private high school in San Francisco, and then he transferred. And at that private school, he was with my cousin, Ian Fox, is more like a brother to me. And so when he transferred schools into a completely different county, my cousin made the introduction. Hey, this guy's new. You should show him the ropes. He's a great friend of mine. I've been, So we became immediate friends in senior year in class. We had a wonderful time together senior year. And then when we graduated, we decided, hey, let's fly to Europe and drive across Europe. Maybe we'll start in London and we'll go to Portugal. So we flew to London together. We were 18 years old, and we bought a old Fiat 131 for a couple £100. I think we had like 200 pounds each. We had very little money, and we thought, let's spice this boring car up. It was all white, so we painted like the doors red and the roof red. So a little spray can, and we drove to Portugal. We made it. And we had a lovely time in Portugal, just goofing off, being late teenagers. And then he said, look, I'm not cut out for this. He was going to stay 3 months. He got a month. Things were more expensive. He wasn't used to the language barrier. I was born in England, so I've been coming to Europe for a while. Anyway, he went back. And a couple years later, I came home. And when I came home, we reunited. He starts talking about, alien spaceships and UFOs and Roswell. And I said to myself, immediately, I said, what a bummer. I'm going to have to cut this. One of my best friends has lost his mind. This is such a bummer. I was like, I'm going to have to cut this guy loose. And so at the time I was apprenticing at a video production company in San Francisco. And there was a guy who was my kind of boss. His name was Richard Van Sickle. He was about 10 years my senior. And he was in production and doing newsreel, all kinds of stuff. And I was working kind of with him and one other person. And I just was, at the office, telling him about how unfortunate it was about my really good friend had gone off the deep end. And he's talking about a UFO crash at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And just all this crazy stuff. And he looked at me and Richard goes, "Oh, yeah, you didn't hear about Roswell?" I said, "How am I? No, I didn't hear about. How am I supposed to hear about Roswell?" He said, "Well, actually, the military actually confessed that was their initial press release was that they, it was not of Earth origin." And I think, Richard, come on, really? Anyway, I said, okay. I did that, and a couple other things happened, and there was actually another friend of the family's who was British. His family owned Yardley's Soaps. And every Christmas we'd get together and have this big Christmas dinner, and he was a pilot, and he would talk about this UFO sighting, and I had absolutely no interest and zero interest in hearing about it. But fast forward, 10 years, whatever it was, I called my friend Michael Gardner, who I have a lot of respect for, a very prominent family in England, and I said, "Michael, you know that UFO story you always tell at Christmas? Like, can you tell me?" He goes, "What's the sudden interest?" And I said, let me hear it." He tells me. So I said, "All right, I'm going to go to a couple conferences. I'm going to meet a few military men, and I'm going to I'm just going to put this behind me once and for all. This is obviously a bunch of conspiratorial nonsense." So I started digging into it. And the more I dug, the more I decided, my gosh, I think there's something going on here. And and that's how it kind of started. And I was like, I'm gonna make a documentary on UFOs.
I've watched all those. You go on Amazon Prime and type in UFOs. There's just pages and pages of films. But yours is, I think, by far and away the best. The phenomenon, the program, and then your recent one, Moment of Contact. That just stands out head and shoulders above the others. I know the Age of Disclosure is the big talking media event at the moment. It's good, but I like your films better, and it's clear when you pile it all together as you do with striking visuals and beautiful cinematography of the people you're interviewing and so on. It's obvious there's something going on. So I guess the question is, what is it? And so let me just tee this off with a quote that I like from Leslie Kean, who her book,
yes, of course.
UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record. And she was who was behind the 2017 New York Times famous article about the program. So she says in her book, roughly 90 to 95% of UFO sightings can be explained as, and then she has a long list, weather balloons, flares, sky lanterns, planes flying in formation, secret military aircraft, birds reflecting the sun, planes reflecting the sun, blimps, helicopters, the planets Venus and Mars, meteors and meteorites, space junk, satellites, swamp gas, spinning eddies, sundogs, ball lightning, ice crystals, reflected light off the clouds, lights on the ground, or lights reflected in the cockpit window, temperature inversions, hole punch clouds, and the list goes on. So what we're really talking about here, and you've really adroitly put together the kind of sequence of that 5 to 10% that are just really standing out. So if we could agree that 95% have prosaic explanations, what do we do with those anomalies? See, that's to me, in the history of philosophy of science, it's always the anomalies that drive new revolutions and new discoveries. Okay, the old theory doesn't account for this. What does? And maybe we just say, like you said at the start, I don't know. We don't know. But somebody must know. Because this isn't like, like some paranormal, supernatural phenomenon. Is there a God or not? Well, we'll never know. It's not like NASA's going to find out if there's a God or not. But NASA could find out if aliens have come here, right? In principle. I would like to think, because you interviewed Marco Rubio, I kind of have a good feeling about him. Like, this guy is a straight shooter. I think if we had something and he could tell us, he would tell us.
Well, I didn't interview him, but the individual Joel at News Nation who did provided that footage that was in my latest cut of Moment of Contact, New Revelations of Alien Encounters. I met with his press people, and we were trying to schedule an interview in 2023, but I think he was tied up with Dan Farrah's film, Age of Disclosure. And it's certainly interesting when you think of someone of his, level within government, and he's not retired, he's current, right? I mean, he was a senator at the time. why on earth would, if he really felt there was nothing to it, why would he give an interview and say the things that he said? And it kind of makes sense to me because I remember, going after Jimmy Carter, and I think I was one of the first people to get Jimmy Carter on camera admitting to having looked into it during his presidency, and he also had a sighting, but he talked about that when he was running for president. And then I got Gerald Ford, and I got Podesta, sort of indirectly Clinton, and their efforts to get to the bottom of the phenomenon. And one of the things that I walked away with is along the lines of what Rubio said, with that presidents are kept out of the loop. Carter said, yeah, basically we made inquiries and essentially weren't happy with the answers we were getting. Podesta said the same thing, like the Clinton administration. I don't know if you remember or not, but Lawrence Spelman Rockefeller was putting some serious pressure on the Clinton administration for transparency on the topic. In fact, he went as far as saying, if you don't, I will publish an article about it on every magazine across state to state or whatever. So Clinton said, okay, well, give me a case that you want me to look into. And he came back and said Roswell. And so evidently Clinton administration made a serious effort to look into it, and we're not happy with, they were just getting the runaround. They're not happy with the answers they were getting. So it's interesting, that presidents, and Rubio had said that, and when Rubio said it, it aligned with my research. Of course, I don't have a president directly saying I was kept out of the loop. I've got, Ford saying he wasn't happy with the answers he was getting. Carter, basically, we made inquiries, but the responses were all over the place. I know the Clinton administration, according to Podesta, they were not happy. They were getting the runaround. So, let's just say, if we could suspend judgment for a moment and say that if it were true, if there was some unknown government agency, not elected officials, that operated in complete secrecy, and they did have, let's just say, I'm not saying you believe it or I believe it or whoever, but if it were true, Roswell really was something of non-Earth origin or non-human intelligence, and I was in possession of it, and I wanted to keep it secret for whatever reason, I probably wouldn't tell the president. I mean, these are elected officials that come and go 4 to 8 years. I don't know. It kind of makes sense that if you were to keep a secret of that nature, to not want to give it all out to the president. I don't know. Certainly, I'm told, and I could be wrong here, but I'm told the last president that had a pretty good or bigger picture was President Bush Sr.
Mm-hmm. Well, so, like Trump's latest statement on that is, I've talked to a lot of people who do seem convinced that there's something, but I've just not seen it to convince myself. Now, maybe it's what you're saying. Maybe presidents just don't know everything. Then maybe there is something like a deep state. This was always, the first Trump go around, there was always this talk of the deep state about other issues.
Yeah.
But that's totally believable. And, after the Doge stuff with Elon, who kind of discovered all these things all this money was going out and all these programs we were funding that nobody paid much attention to. And it's like, wow, okay, who's mining the fort over there? Well, maybe it's so big, the bureaucracy is so massive, nobody knows everything that's going on.
It really makes you wonder. I went to the 50th anniversary of Roswell, and this is when I was kind of like, I was on the fence with it. I was definitely interested. I'm interested enough where I was out there poking around, asking questions. And the one advantage that I had when I went in 1997 to Roswell, New Mexico for the 50th anniversary is that people they're in their 20s or 30s that were firsthand witnesses or that were there, they were now in their 70s and 80s. So they were obviously still alive. And everyone across the board said to me on camera that their lives were threatened. They literally said this, that they were threatened, that not only would they be picking their bones out of the desert, but their family's bones out of the desert. And I'm not saying that I just categorically believe that just because they said it, but I wasn't paying anybody to say that. And the different people I was meeting, it seemed to be, I don't know, they seemed to be pretty convinced that's the threat that was coming down, from above.
But why don't whistleblower laws that we have in place protect those people now?
Well, so I, I've been in touch with a few so-called metal benders or people that claim, behind the scenes, and trying to get them to come forward to participate in a number of different films that I'm doing. And this is, I hate to say this, but it's like, the more extraordinary the claim, the more extraordinary the evidence. I mean, there's no question that applies here. No question. But, at least you want to get them to talk or reveal the details needed to verify their claims, right? Because David Grush has said some pretty extraordinary things. And if true, the implications are very profound, not just in the United States, but around the world. They seem to be legitimately fearful of their security, not just their clearances, but their personal safety. I've met these people, some of them behind the scenes. Maybe they're lying to me. They didn't come to me; I came to them through other people. But they said the protections are not in place. There's not enough security for us. No way. As at this point, there needs to be more. They need to be better whistleblower protections. They're going to lose their clearances. They're going to lose their job, and some of them are even fearful that they're going to lose their life. I'm not saying I believe that or I don't believe it, but that's definitely a legitimate concern of these individuals that I have met with. So, they tried to pass, I guess, the UAP Disclosure Act. They had whistle protections. I think it was 2023, and it didn't. It passed in the Senate, not in the House. And now they're trying to do another go around. I'm not sure where that's at. I haven't been paying attention.
Yeah, they should. I mean, I'm on the Galileo project team with Avi Loeb, and Christopher Mellon's on that group as well. So this has come up a number of times, the whistleblower problem, and he says pretty much what you say, that there's still not enough legal protection of whistleblowers. Although those are government people, at the end of your film, The Program, I just rewatched those, by the way, this last weekend. Cool. They were great. So well done. The final scene in that was your interview with Gary Nolan at Stanford. And, he says he's seen stuff and, he knows stuff. And you ask him, all right, can you tell us what you saw? And he's like, I'm not going to say one way or the other. It's like, dude, come on. We want to know. Everybody wants to know. But now, why would a private citizen, a college professor, why would he be worried? What would he be worried about for telling you what he saw?
Well, this is what I've been told, that because it's national security, people can just be plugged. There's no due process. You just picked up and put right behind bars. And evidently that's very real. And it doesn't just have to pertain to, it could be nuclear secrets or something like that. It doesn't have to pertain to the UAP or UFO phenomenon. It could be other related. I mean, they're concerned of violating their NDAs or that it's anything national.
Oh, I see.
And here's the thing, like this, somebody explained this to me the other day, because I used to have this perspective, like, I'm going to uncover the fact that, it's a vast universe and we get periodic visitation and, interplanetary visitation. And for whatever reason, the government's decided to, cover that up. And it's going to be this kumbaya moment where we're not alone, and this group hug and, the didgeridoo. And this general looked at me. And he was like pretty much laughing in my face. He goes, "Kid, this is a while ago. It was about 20 years ago." He goes, you have no idea. Like, let me explain something to you. And this really changed my perspective. He said, okay, let me tell you, and this is not even related to the crash retrieval. I'll explain that alleged crash retrieval after this. He says, he goes, head of the Air Force, you expect us to come forward and you employ us to protect and secure our airspace and say, hey, there are craft of unknown origin displaying highly advanced technology. They don't have any wings, any tail, any visible means of propulsion. They fly rings around our fastest jets. They penetrate the most sensitive airspace on the planet. We don't know who they are, where they come from, or what they want. We have no visible means of defense against them. Shall they turn to be hostile? Thank you and good night. He goes, do you honestly think that we're going to tell the general public that? He just looked at me like, you really think that's what we're going to do? He goes, hell no, we will not do that. So if it is true, and these objects are whizzing around with impunity, then those in a power with all the sensory data, right? You got the jets and the sensory data and the FLIR and all the rest of it, radar. I would imagine that they would sit back, observe, and learn, try to figure this out. Is it the Russians? Is it China? And then you do the process of elimination. And if it ain't Russia, it ain't China, some other world power. I mean, what's left? It falls into that sort of other category. I don't know what the percentage of Blue Book cases that were in that other bin, maybe 10 or 15%. I don't quote me on that, but
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And so I don't know. I could see the justification for not wanting to release that type of information from fear, panic, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. But although I don't buy the theory that the stock market would crash and religious people would lose their faith or anything like that, I just don't. And if anything, an agency like NASA announcing that they've discovered extraterrestrial intelligence here, they could go to Congress and go, "Hey, we need to double our budget because this is huge," and Congress would go, "Yeah, this is huge." I mean, I would think that if anything, disclosure would be encouraged by some of these bureaucracies that would, competing for funding. But anyway, let me make one more point on the government secrecy thing. I'm kind of conflicted about it. On the one hand, you can think about the U-2 spy plane and the SR-71 Blackbird, who were developed right here in Southern California and in Burbank, the Skunk Works, and then tested right over in Edwards Air Force Base and then in Nevada at Area 51. There's millions of people around here. How did they not know about it? And I read the books by Ben Rich and Kelly Johnson that how they did all this. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, those people did keep those secrets. I mean, the people that worked on those Skunk Works projects did not tell their spouses. They did not go to the media. They did not go on 60 Minutes. But they really honored their NDAs and so on. So that's possible. But I asked Garrett Graff. I had him on the show. He has a 500-page book called UFO, the inside story of U.S. government search for alien life here and out there. So he's a good journalist, historian. He wrote a book on the FBI, 9/11, Watergate, and Raven Rock, the government's Cold War doomsday plan. Where all the government, heads of cabinets are going to go to this underground bunker place, like right out of Failsafe or one of those movies. I mean, it's real. Okay, so all that's true. So I asked him about can the government keep the secret for this long, since let's say the Roswell time period. So he says the challenge for me with government conspiracies is they presuppose a level of competence that is not on display in the rest of the work that the government does. I just don't believe that the government is capable of keeping a secret at scale like this for any meaningful period of time. For example, my next book is a history of D-Day, Operation Overlord, the biggest, most important secret that the U.S. government had. They had 6, 8, 10 complete breaches of secrecy in the 6 or 8 months before. One guy literally accidentally mailed a copy of the invasion plans to his mom in Chicago. One officer got drunk and accidentally started talking about the invasion at a cocktail party. Another officer left a briefcase behind on a bus that he ended up having to chase down the street to recover the invasion document. That's one operation in a 6-month period. So to me, I just don't see the capability of the U.S. government to keep any meaningful secrets about this UFO program over such a long period of time. Well, and yet you have a conspiracy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, that's a really good point. And I do actually respond to that because if you think about it, you in the 40s, you had the admission that we recovered something of a non-Earth origin or not originating here, right? You did have that announcement. Of course, they covered it up 24 hours later or whatever. But a lot of those people that were directly involved with the cover-up went on the record later and said, hey, actually, the original press release was true. I was there. I touched the debris. My son touched the debris. So that was like, you can believe him or you cannot believe him. And in the 50s, we had that massive two consecutive weekends flyover of Washington, D.C., right? Then you had, orders to scramble jets to intercept these things. They had authorization to fire at them if they could fire at them. Then you had that huge press conference with General John Sanford And he says quite a bit, it was the biggest press conference since the end of World War II. And then you had the formation of the Robertson panel, right? The CIA sponsored Robertson panel, and that was when they adopted the policy of ridicule. But in the 60s, you had a news article in the New York Times with former head of CIA, Roscoe Hillenkotter, said that, behind the scene, in front, we're making fun of it. Behind the scenes, we're taking it incredibly seriously. These things are real. In the 70s, you had the United Nations event where you had a lot of, person that investigated UFOs in an official capacity for the United States Air Force participate, and other witnesses. United Nations, I think that was 78. In the 80s, we've had number in the 90s, 2000s, people keep, making these allegations. So it has been leaking out for decades. People have come forward and tried to get the truth out. I think what's different today is in what was it, 2017, a handful of intel folks, insiders, in protest of excessive secrecy, decided to walk some evidence out onto the front page of the New York Times. And that kind of changed everything. And of course, you had the former Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, confirmed that he did launch this investigation. So people at high levels were taking these things seriously, right? And then, of course, you had some sensory data. Some of it's kind of pretty compelling, the tic-tac, and then the witnesses and the radar and all that stuff. So there has been an effort, but I think that policy of ridicule really stuck in '53. I think it was a very effective campaign that the Air Force and the CIA decided to do, because if you think about it, if you have military fighter pilots or civilian or commercial airline pilots talking about things that don't make sense, there's nothing funny about that. That should be a serious investigation, So yeah, that's my response.
So
that has been kind of leaking.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, okay. So there have been plenty of leaks, or else how would we know about all these things? Okay, good.
How would we know about it? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, although, so back to the pilot thing, there's stories about the SR-71 Blackbird when it was being tested out in Edwards, I guess it was. And, commercial pilots didn't know about it, and they would see this thing that's, like 30,000 feet above them at 30,000 feet going, 4,000 miles an hour, and they're like, what is that? Like, oh my God, dude! Like the guys, the UAP pilot guys, whoa, oh, dude, look at that, right? Yeah. And it's like, oh, it turns out it was a spy plane. So, one theory for what all these UAPs are, it's something like that. Maybe DARPA has some, super spy drones or planes or something we just won't find out about for another couple of decades when they're declassified or something like that.
Yeah, because I wonder, because I've talked about this as well, and we have pretty good documented evidence, particularly photographic and radar and visual, of these disc-shaped objects. I think one of the best photographs taken in 1950 at McMinnville, Oregon, by Paul Trent and his wife Evelyn, both witnesses to it. A couple of pictures, broad daylight, points of reference, pretty amazing. Could that be a secret? Ultra secret? Yeah. But that would mean that some unknown government agency from somewhere has been keeping this revolutionary technology secret for a long time. Because whatever they're observing is not whizzing around on Jet A fuel. These things aren't any wings, aren't any tail. They barely make any noise. Some people report maybe a slight humming or buzzing, but for the most part, a lot of people I talked to said, had I not looked up, I wouldn't have even known it was there. So if that's the case, and then that doesn't even touch on these alleged reports of close encounters of the third kind, because you've got close encounter of the first kind, second kind, and third kind. And that was a category that was adopted, or that was designed by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who investigated UFOs for the Air Force from 47 to 69. And close encounters of the third kind is when witnesses claim to see occupants connected to the craft, whether on the ground or whatever. So that's not even touching on that aspect of the phenomenon, right? If we just say, all right, somebody's clearly been in possession, because we got enough data, I think we can convince any jury that there's something whizzing around that's not conventional, that's highly exotic. and for going on for decades. Some argue that it's been going on for much longer than that, but whatever. The modern UFO wave, let's just say.
Yeah.
The Foo Fighters. So either somebody's been in possession of it and is still in possession of it. That's extraordinary. That's incredible. Or we're under some sort of observation by something.
Yeah. Yeah, so the three hypotheses on the table are, ordinary terrestrial, the laundry list I read you from Leslie Kean's book, balloons and whatnot.
I like swamp gas.
Then extraordinary terrestrial. So this would be something like the Russians or the Chinese or whoever, or DARPA, or our own agencies have developed some kind of super advanced technology. Or the third one then, space aliens, they're extraterrestrials.
Or
other. Or other, yeah, okay, so yeah, what would go in the other? I like kind of jump off the...
I like other because I don't know, man. Maybe it's us coming back from the future. I mean, maybe they're right here. I mean, who knows?
Okay, so yeah, now it gets a little weird with the
I don't know.
Multidimensional. Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a perfectly legitimate thing to say. I'm so glad to hear you say that because none of us know for sure.
No.
But you come across as reasonably confident that this is probably not ordinary terrestrial or even extraordinary terrestrial.
I'd put my life on it at this point. I'd put my life on it. What it is, I don't know. It is, I don't know. But the fact that
so on a Bayesian scale between 1% and 99%, where are you on the?
I'm at 99% that something extraordinary is whizzing around in our airspace. What it is, I don't know. But that I'm absolutely convinced of. And I didn't start off.
Have you? I forget. Have you had any UFO experiences, or have you actually seen anything, or is it secondhand, thirdhand?
It was funny you should say that because when I was 20, I was with my girlfriend Lisa Reinhardt at the time, and it was about 9:00 at night, and I was getting ready. I was moving to France. I think in a few months. I lived abroad for a year and a half. And we were lying in bed together about 9:00 at night, and to the right we had a big, probably like a 5x4 solid sheet of glass window, so we could see out. A little yard, trees, maybe about 30 feet high trees, and then we're just hanging out, and she looks out the window and she's like, "Hey, what's that?" And there was this white kind of light. Nothing super extraordinary, but it was like a circular, kind of an orby thing. And it was just kind of, it was almost bright where you could see the light reflect a little bit on our faces. And it was just kind of it looked like it was kind of pulsating a little bit. She looked at me and she goes, "What the F is that?" And I said, "I don't know what that is, but whatever it is, I get the feeling it knows we're looking at it." She goes, I feel that too. Close the blinds. So I leapt up in my haste. I ripped the blinds off the wall, and they're on the floor, and I'm down there trying to get the blinds back and hook them on the thing, and I can see it just kind of just doing this, right? And I finally got the blinds closed, and we clutch each other in bed, going, "That was weird. I wonder if it's still there." And a couple minutes later, we draw the blinds, and it was gone. Now, hey man, that could have been anything, right? If it happened today, I would say that was somebody's drone. But back then, this was probably, 1989. And I don't know, it was unusual. I bumped into her almost 20 years later. I was 39 years old. I was walking on a beach in San Diego with one of my really good friends. And we were supposed to go left. We went, my friend was like a really fit guy, and every time I go visit him, he's like, "You're going to come down to the beach, we're going to jog the beach, and then we're swimming out to the buoy, and then we're coming back, and we're jogging back, and then we're going to get breakfast." I was like, "Okay, John," all right. And so we jogged the beach, we swam out to the buoy, which was pretty far, swam out to the buoy, swam back. I was pretty tired. And he goes, and I said, "Hey, let's go to the right." And he goes, "There's nothing to the right. I live here. I go here every day. There's nothing." Long story short, I convince him we're going to the right. We go to the right. I bump into Lisa Reinhardt, who's now married. She's got a daughter who's 6 or 7. They were on the beach. And I was like, "Lisa, what are you," and she was visiting, I was visiting. And I came up to her and I pulled her to one side. I said, "Lisa, do you remember that thing that we saw?" She goes, "You're damn right I do." I said, "Tell me what you remember," because I was curious if she remembered the same thing I did. And she said, the weirdest thing about it was it knew we were looking at it. I said, I felt the same thing. And so that was it. So what it was, I have no idea. But that's it.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there a story like that from John Lennon in New York City? But
Nobody told me there'd be days like these.
He was with a woman who was not Yoko, apparently, so he didn't want to make a big deal about this story. But they same thing. They looked out the window of wherever they were in New York City, and there was this big bright light kind of thing.
Yeah, he said he couldn't hit it with a rock or something. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild.
People
So what do we make of eyewitness accounts and so forth? Okay, so let me just read you something from Scott Kelly, the astronaut and pilot, whose brother Mark was also an astronaut.
I like both of those guys a lot.
Yeah. So this was at a NASA press conference, and somebody asked him about, what about all these pilots that are, these are trained professionals, and here's all the UAP stuff that you talk about. This is what they said they saw. And he says, in my experience of flying over 15,000 hours in 30-something years in airplanes and in space, the environment that we fly in is very conducive to optical illusions. So I get why these pilots would look at that go fast video and think it was going really, really fast. I remember one time I was flying off Virginia Beach Military Operating Area, and my RIO, radar intercept officer, who sits in the back of the Tomcat, was convinced we flew by a UFO. I didn't see it, so we turned around to go look at it. Turns out it was a Bart Simpson balloon. He says, my brother Mark Kelly, a former NASA astronaut who's now a U.S. Senator, shared a story with me about an experience he had years ago, that when he was the commander of STS-124, they were getting ready to close the payload bay doors of the space shuttle, and they see something in the payload bay, and they thought it was a tool, maybe a bolt, and they couldn't quite figure it out, and they were potentially going to have to go on a spacewalk to retrieve it. But before they did, my brother grabbed a camera. They took a picture of it. When they blew it up, they realized that is not a bolt or a tool in the payload bay. It was the International Space Station 80 miles away. He says there's cases where pilots have rendezvoused on a buoy because they thought that was their wingman. It's just a very, very challenging environment to work, especially at night.
Yeah, no question. That falls into those categories: misidentified aircraft, misidentified, And I generally like to focus on mass sightings. Like, for instance, I investigated a case in Australia. Shane Ryan did a documentary on it, and it was met with the same skepticism as a lot of the cases that I initially go out to investigate, because I often think, like, it can't be, therefore it isn't. Like, you can't have a mass sighting and the whole world not know about it. To me, it seems like so implausible. But in any case, I investigated that case. I went and met with some of the witnesses it was the better part of 50 years later. I think it might have been 50 years later. But it was 1966 at a school just outside Melbourne, Westall High School and Primary, I think. And there were, according to the teacher and all the students, almost 400 people out in broad daylight. And you have this disc hovering above, doing things it shouldn't be doing. And the teacher's looking at it, the science teacher, Mr. Greenwood, looking at it. And then it comes down and lands. Now that's like, okay, either everyone's hallucinating or lying, or there's no ambiguity to something like that, right? It was like the kids ran up to it. They got within 6-7 feet of it, broad daylight, sitting on the ground. They describe it as a disc. Those are the cases that I really like to stick my teeth into. You got a bunch of people that have everything to lose, nothing to gain. They're not out there selling books, and, this is what I saw. Like, wow, I keep hearing about these discs. You saw one land. This guy took a photograph of one. Like, what are all these people seeing? What could possibly be the explanation? Because it's like there's so many sightings. You and I would go on for a week if I told you how many blurry pictures I get of people. Oh, I saw this. It's like, oh, not this again. No, But I really like to stay focused on the real, like the small percentage of cases that are just like, wow, what was that?
Yeah, those are good because it can't be explained by just one person having a nightmare or a hallucination or something like that. It's like that reminds me of the miracle of Fatima, Portugal.
Oh, that's incredible.
1917.
Very baffling, right?
That's not what there's like 50,000 people out, and they were expecting a miracle, and all of a sudden the sun is dancing around the sky, and lots of people reported it independently. So this requires some other explanation short of the sun actually moving around. That's much harder.
I heard, I was in Italy investigating the Magenta case a little bit, and another case which I ended up dismissing was a photographic case that I got the photos analyzed, and nope, they looked impressive, and I unfortunately I put them in the can. But while I was there, I spoke to somebody that was high up at the Vatican over a Zoom call, and this individual on camera with the interview said that there is, and I don't know if this is true, but says there is either photographic or film footage of that event at the Vatican. Have you ever heard that? Would that make sense?
No,
Would that make sense?
I mean, there are like there's like newspaper clipping. If you just look on Wikipedia, they have newspaper clippings from different press sources of that day with some illustrations and photographs of people looking up, and it could be a sundog or something up in the sky. Who knows exactly what they saw? There's theories about this, but yeah, but I haven't heard that one about the Vatican having some.
I wasn't inquiring because I assumed that was not the case. But this individual seemed to be quite certain that there was. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that
But
would be.
don't you, I mean, between your last three films and The Age of Disclosure, I mean, do you get a sense like this is different now than it was, say, in the 90s when, I mean, it seems like we're getting closer to somebody showing us something once and for all. I mean, like the congressional hearings, with Grush and the other guys, say, I know somebody that saw the spaceship. Or touched the spaceship or saw the aliens themselves. Okay, who was that? Can't tell you. Well, where were they? Can't tell you. You've in your interviews with these people, same thing. It's like so frustrating. Don't you find that frustrating? Like, dude, can't you take me and my camera crew there to see it?
You heard me ask an aerospace engineer if you just watched Moment of Contact, New Revelations of Alien Encounters. You heard me ask, like, what's the answer to that? You can't just tell me it's classified and tell me you saw this stuff. You're killing me here. Like, what? Come on. So now I'm sort of transitioned to the point where let's just call their bluffs. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to believe Lou. You don't have to believe Grush. You don't have to believe Hal. You don't have to believe Eric Davis or anybody else. But how about this? Why don't we lock arms as a community of civilians and see what we can do to rattle the cages of our elected officials to create an environment to provide immunity to these individuals that are making these outrageous, incredible claims, right? And the implications are global. So maybe there's a way we can create a platform and call their bluff and say, okay, Mr. President, wave the magic wand, provide immunity. Let's have an open congressional hearing. Let's bring this in. If we can make that happen, that would be extraordinary. And why wouldn't we at least try? Because if it's true, you have to confess. If it is true, boy, it'd be the biggest story of the modern. I mean, I can't think of a bigger story
Ever. No, I think everybody agrees. I mean, all the SETI scientists and people like Sagan, so they all said, yeah, this would be the greatest discovery in the history of humanity. Not just history of science, but I mean, are we alone? I mean, it really is almost a religious impulse question.
Yeah.
Because if you think about what a deity is to a religion, it's this super advanced, super powerful, very moral, and so on and so forth, who's out there, not just out there somewhere, but knows we're here. And monitors us, or listens to our prayers, or interacts with us, or saves us, or and all that stuff. And really, even most of the SETI scientists I know are atheists, but it's kind of almost like this is their religion. Like, no, we don't know if they're out there, but the reason I'm looking is because I think they are.
Yeah.
Why else would you look, right?
It's really funny. I back in the '90s when I was really kind of just getting into this, because I was always thinking like, I mean, I was talking to people, civilians and military, that were describing the same encounters, these discs and cigar shape, whatever. And I got the opportunity to talk with Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk the moon, Apollo 14. Mm-hmm. And I said, Dr. Mitchell, I don't understand. Like, if they were here, why wouldn't they just land? Like, make contact. I don't. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why come all this way and then you don't even make contact? And he looked at me and he goes, well, James, do you honestly think, like, let's just say you got into a spaceship and you found life, whatever, either in the solar system or maybe in the who knows, wherever you find it, you get there, you find life. He goes, are you just going to like overtly make your presence known? Or do you think you might sit back and observe them and their culture a little bit before you just, you know what I mean? Are they hostile? What sort of technology do they have? You know, are you going to be greeted with like, you know, what laser beams or whatever, you know? And actually, I thought about it, and I thought, well, gosh, if that were me, I probably would sit back and observe for a little while before I just landed. I think that would make sense. I don't know. It got me thinking a little bit. Maybe.
It
But
is,
what
it
do I
is
know?
one of the answers to the Fermi paradox, you know, Enrico Fermi's question. Where is everybody? Assuming we're not first in the universe to have space travel, then, and, you know, there could be somebody who's 1 billion years younger than us, and they would have colonized the entire galaxy. We would have evidence all over the place. They'd be here. But where is everybody? So one answer is, there's a whole book about this, 50 answers to the Fermi paradox, which is like 50 ways to leave your lover, something like that. And one of them is the prime directive. They've been instructed, just to monitor us, sort of like the Enterprise has this cloaking device, up in the mountain, one of those episodes where they're monitoring this primitive civilization as it develops.
Do you think that makes sense? I mean, does that make sense?
Well, not really. Maybe, I guess, in a science fiction scenario, but
Right.
it seems like we should know. I mean, it's like, it's so big, it's so important. But again, in terms of advanced technology, just look what we've been able to do in a century. From the Wright brothers to the moon in 1916, from 1903 to 1969, we're on the moon. Okay, that's pretty. Or computers, Moore's law doubling of everything, not just computers, but almost all technology. So if you extrapolate it out, what aliens could do, in 1,000 years of Moore's law, or 1,000,000 years, the astronomers like Avi Loeb points out, aliens could have visited Earth, 2 million years ago. We would have no idea. The evidence would all be eroded away, be gone. Even the pyramids wouldn't last a million years; they just erode away. So this could have happened 100 million years ago during the dinosaurs. We would just never know.
I finally got to go to Kitty Hawk.
Oh, we did. Okay.
Over the summer. Yeah, I always wanted to go to Kitty Hawk. I was like, I wanted to see with the Wright brothers. First controlled powered flight. Is that right? Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. It was controlled powered flight.
That's correct. Yeah, 1903. 10 seconds.
They were in the air for 10 seconds. Isn't it incredible? And it's just incredible to think. And then I went to, I believe it was 2003. It was 2003. It was a celebration of 100 years of flight. And I was at a museum in Washington, D.C., and I believe there were a number of astronauts there. And I remember thinking, my gosh, we went to the moon, what is it, 65 years after our first flight? Mm-hmm. Like, that's incredible. And as you say, imagine a civilization a million years advanced or 2 million years advanced. I mean, my gosh, that would appear to be magic to us, right? Their technology, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. So who knows? Yeah,
I call this my God gamut, because it's a gamut. I'm an atheist, but if we did discover a deity, it would be something like a super advanced extraterrestrial intelligence or a far future human. I mean, just look at what ChatGPT and AI and AGI soon is going to be able to do. It's just astonishing. And then just extrapolate that out 50,000 years or something. And it's whatever we would encounter would just be so wholly other that it seems like a deity.
It was so incredible. It was funny, actually, because sometimes when I can't sleep or I want to just kind of wind down, I'll put on like a podcast, documentary or something. And last night I listened to, I think it was on either PBS Frontline or maybe it was think of the other name of the. But in any case, it was all about AI, and they were talking about there were certain aspects of AI that AI kind of tried to do dirty trickster or tried to manipulate, and they were trying to figure out like how AI did what it did. And that was kind of like this anomaly, like, wait a minute here, it's almost developing its, and they were trying to like put a computer out or do something, and then it was fighting for its own survival almost. Did you hear about this?
Absolutely. No, there's been all kinds of conversations
absolutely
about this.
Fascinating stuff. 60
amazing,
minutes of Frontline. Yeah. I mean, and where are we going with it?
Well, but they also hallucinate a lot. They make up a bunch of stuff that's not true. So we have to be careful about that.
He said there was somebody interacting with AI, and he said, well, meet me down in the lobby. I'll be wearing a red tie with a blue suit. It's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally
Oh my
crazy.
gosh.
But on
So
the
let
second
me.
hypothesis,
Yeah,
extraordinary terrestrial. The reason I'm skeptical of that the Russians
yeah.
or Chinese have something, so vastly advanced than any of our technology. First of all, wouldn't we see it in Ukraine in the case of Russia, and in the case of China? How would they get that far ahead of us? In other
Mm.
words, if you just take a cell phone, they're all pretty much the same. A laptop, computer, they're all the same. And the Chinese, the Russians, so all our jets, planes, phones, it'd be like we're still flying biplanes and they have the stealth bomber. I mean, we would know. We all spy on each other. All these tech companies, they all have NDAs and intellectual property law to protect them, but they all have pretty much the same programs and software and hardware. Nobody's more advanced than maybe a year ahead of somebody else. So I just don't see how a military could develop this without our spies knowing about it, or vice versa if it was us. Just because historically, that's even the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project. Well, the Russians had a spy, Klaus Fuchs, working on the program. So, it's just how would they do that without us knowing?
I remember Christopher Mellon said to me, he said, "Do you have any idea how our government would respond to these incursions over super secret military installations if that craft had a Russian or a Chinese flag on its tail?"
Yeah,
He said it would be
right.
all hands on deck, like
Oh, yeah.
full, yeah, emergency, and yet, I talked to some of the people within the UAP task force, and it's like they've even said to me, like, "What is that? That doesn't make who's that? And people are like, la la la, like almost,
Yeah.
I talked
Yeah.
to.
So if it's true, if it really exists, it's something not an illusion or whatever. But it just cannot be terrestrial extraordinary. It would have to be extraterrestrial, because that would be like thousands of years of tech development to be able to pull that kind of G's without killing the pilot, or to
Yeah,
go from zero to 10,000 miles an hour in 1 second. That's not possible from the physics we know.
yeah, I interviewed a World War II pilot. He was also had a role with Project Blue Book. He had a sighting in 1955, Colonel William Coleman, and he was either public spokesman for Project Blue Book before it was terminated. Then he worked in the Pentagon. Anyway, he was flying a B-25 bomber, and I think I was the only one to get him on camera talking about this event. It was known, and there was a report made, allegedly, part of Project Blue Book files. But he was flying this B-25 bomber in 1955. He was over Alabama, and I believe he was on his way to Florida. Or maybe he was coming from Florida to Alabama. Sorry, I can't remember that part. But in any case, he was over Alabama. It was 1955, broad daylight. He had a couple of engineers with him, I think from Lockheed and Boeing or something. Lockheed, Boeing, maybe one other. And he was delivering this B-25, and they had a sighting of an object kind of off in the distance, and they were observing it through the canopy, and then it came right across their path, and they were all just gobsmacked by what, according to William Coleman, what on earth they were looking at, because it didn't have any wings. It was a disc-shaped object. So he says, I decided to chase it. So he goes, I hit maximum continuous power in my B-25. And I said, okay, well, I'm sorry, what's maximum what does that mean? He said, well, if I went any faster, the engines were going to blow up. I said, oh, okay.
God.
So he says he went, I think it started off somewhere around 9,000 feet, and the chase ended up to being at treetop level. And he said, he said, James, we were looking out the cockpit, and this thing was right there. I mean, we thought we were going to collide with it. And so he said, I was so low that if I turned to the right to avoid it, the wings were probably going to hit the treetops. So I had to pull up first, get a little more altitude, then bank to the right. And then I kind of lost sight of it for a moment. And then when we leveled off, I looked out the window, and it was this disc-shaped object. He said it was going across a recently plowed field. And he said it was stirring up dust like spirals on either side of it, But in any case, He said when it decided to take off, he said it was just, I mean, a blink of an eye and it was gone. And the interesting thing about that is, if his account is true, and I don't know why he would make it up, but he was a colonel in the United States Air Force, former World War II pilot, is that you hear that account of the observed technology, the alleged observed technology, and it parallels, the account of someone like a David Fravor who describes how this thing maneuvered without any wings, without any tail, and he said it just like if you blinked, it would have just, you thought it would have disappeared in place. And you hear those accounts over and over and over and over, and it really starts to make you wonder, like, what on earth are these people seeing?
Yeah. Well, it can't be, this is my point, it can't be some terrestrial, just extraordinary physics that, the Russians have, they've developed in the last decade. Because you're talking about, Star Trek level technology that would take centuries to develop without us knowing, or without the Chinese knowing that we have it or whatever. So that does suggest if it's real, then it's more likely to be extraterrestrial than terrestrial. So I don't know. Yeah, it'd be nice if we had really good footage of that.
I like to refer to like some of the older photographic evidence, from the 50s and 60s. There's not a lot of it, but there's some pretty good.
But
pretty
the
good
people
photographs.
you've met and interviewed, your sense is that most of them, maybe all that you've met, they're not lying, faking, or just making stuff up to sell books or whatever. They had some kind of genuine experience.
There's a story behind pretty much every single witness I've gotten to, and the better the case, the more compelling the evidence, the more difficult it is to get them to go on camera. It's unbelievable. I remember when I arrived in Australia, I had it was a 50-year-old alleged landing case that happened. I was telling you about it earlier at Westall, and I remember a lot of the researchers that I spoke with. They're like, oh yeah, James Kimball, the guy took a photograph, and this other person, the science teacher, Mr. Greenwood, never going to talk to you. You're never going to get a word out of them. I was like, well, could you just get me in the room with them? Like, can I gotta at least try, And I could give you backstories on pretty much almost all of the people. I mean, I really investigated that alleged landing case that happened at Bentwaters, England, 1980, and I think I was the only one to interview the General Gordon Williams. The Deputy Base Commander, Colonel Charles Halt, all three witnesses that allegedly came within a certain proximity of this landed object, And this is really hard. Like I remember I would show up, like Cabansag, for instance. He's like, I went after him, and he's like, well, I don't know, maybe I'll meet with you, maybe. And I went back and forth for a while, and I've known that, like, when a witness finally decides to meet with you and they agree to it, you don't wait a day. You go immediately, because they'll sleep on it, and then they'll wake up the next morning and go, why am I doing this? What do I have to benefit? This is not exactly a career-enhancing move. I'm seeing, like, aliens, little green men, whatever. So I've always learned the better the witness, the more compelling the case, the more difficult, generally speaking, it is to get them to go on the record. I mean, case in point, I interviewed the governor of Arizona, Fife Symington.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fascinating case that happened in 1997. It happened on March 13th. Fascinating case because across the whole state of Arizona. Yeah, the Phoenix Lights. And a lot of people used to get angry because I would talk to some of the witnesses, and they'd say, Phoenix Lights, no, it was the massive, craft. I was like, that's not the lights. It's like, okay. But like, for instance, the governor. I mean, there's a story behind the fact that I got him to come forward. That wasn't easy to admit, having looked into it, taken it seriously, and then ultimately he confesses, hey, you know what? I saw that thing too. But there's a backstory on how I got him to finally come around.
That's right. Didn't he initially made fun of it by dressing in an alien suit, but then he regretted doing that.
Yeah, I got him 10 years later, and I'll tell you what I think got him to come forward. I put a list together, and I was kind of like what I did with Out of the Blue. I did Out of the Blue. I finished it. It took me 5 years, maybe a little bit more. And how do you know a documentary's done? It's usually like you're out of money. Everybody's in a fetal position crying. You know what I mean? Like, and
funny.
I remember pushing hard on Out of the Blue, and my partner Boris was in a fetal crying, and I've been there too. And his wife's like, "You're killing my husband. This nightmare has to end." It's like, anyway, sold the film. to NBC. I think it was NBC Universal, and then 3 years later I got a letter, and I owned the rights again. So I was like, I'm gonna revamp this film and re-release it, and make it to be the film that I've always wanted it to be. And I had a list of 10 people that I was going after, and one of them was Clinton. One down from that was Governor Fife Simonton. And I remember my partner, he goes, "You don't have a snowball's chance in hell." I said, "Well, I'm going for it. If I have a 0.001% chance." So to my absolute amazement, Governor Fife Simonton agrees to meet with me. And I remember my partner said, "What is he going to say?" I said, "Who cares? Let's go. He's in Santa Barbara." Jump in the car, driving down. And I thought, you know, I think something of, because I was thinking constantly like how I can pry whatever he knows out of him, you know? So I thought, let me call his former constituent and a witness to the event, Stacey Rhodes. Let me give her a call. I said, "Stacey, you're not going to believe, you know." And she goes, I said, "Is there anything you'd like to say to him?" And she said, "You damn right there is." Because, you know, she's like, "We put him in office and we all saw this thing and we were asking for an investigation and he poo-pooed it and made fun of it, had his aide dressed up in an alien suit, and we're still pissed off all these years later." So I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "Let me take a statement." I had my little pocket tape recorder and I took a statement from her, and I went in and I thought, well, let me get as much interview out of him as I possibly can first, because he might feel ambushed and it might piss him off and he might kick me. I don't know. So I got as much, 3/4 of the way through the interview, and it was going well. And he was like, "Yeah, I looked into it. I had, the Pentagon and Luke Air Force Base, and we were taking it seriously, yada, yada, and really wanted to kind of dampen down the public excitement. And that's why I did this. I wanted to kind of lighten the mood. And I, had my aide dress up. And then I said, hey, I've got a little message here that I pre-recorded from a witness and one of your constituents. And do you mind if I play it for you, and all on camera?" And he got a little kind of, he's like, "Wow, it's been a while since I've been and he kind of got in his seat a little bit. And she's like, "Governor, what, we put you in office and all of us saw something that was truly inexplicable and blah, blah, blah. And you went out there and ridiculed and made fun of us, and how could you do that to us?" And blah, 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 going on and on. And he could see like, wow, that stunt I pulled really rubbed some people the wrong way.
Wow.
And I could see him, I could see how it was affecting him. Like, I don't think he realized just how offended a lot of his constituents were. Because look, people weren't saying, "Hey, ET's landed," but we saw this thing, and thousands of people saw it because they were out on the night.
Weren't there two incidences? There was the military flare drop.
Oh yeah, they dropped flares.
There was something else later that was a completely different thing.
Yeah. They dropped flares over the Barry Goldwater. It was a genius idea. Yeah, but in any case, he just broke down, and he kind of just right then and there, he goes, "You know what? I saw that thing too. I saw it too." And he goes, "I was captain in the Air Force, pilot. That thing was not from here." And I said, "How did you know that wasn't from here?" He goes, "The size and how slow it flew." As everybody described it, I had people telling me, like, I was lying on my front lawn, like the whole family. We were lying on our front lawn, and it was passing over the top of us so slow we thought it was going to land. And he said you could see compartments and metal, and it was just silent, just floated right over. And I heard that account from a lot of people. Well, there was some famous actor who said he saw it in his airplane. Really famous actor. I don't trying to remember his name.
That's right. I forget who that is now. Yeah, I heard that too.
Anyway,
now, I want to ask you about Roswell.
Yes, sir.
What's wrong with the explanation that it was Project Mogul, these high altitude balloons with acoustic sensitive equipment to listen for upper atmosphere nuclear explosion tests by the Soviet Union? That was the explanation. Later.
Yeah, if you look at Project Mogul after, I don't know what year it was, but back in 1947, it was essentially the same thing as a conventional weather balloon, but a whole bunch of them tied together with a sensor box, right? So, people like intelligence officer Major Jesse Marcel, who's like, "I dealt with weather balloons every damn day. I know what a weather balloon looks like." And if you look at Project Mogul later, like in the 50s, it was much more kind of advanced and it looked more exotic. And like, maybe that could be like, maybe, but not in 47. They just strung a bunch of conventional weather balloons together. We made that distinction when we did. I really investigated that when I did the phenomenon, because we looked into the Roswell case again. And we got 2 out of the 3 people in the press photo. It was General Roger Ramey. It was Colonel DuBose, and Jesse Marcel. And Jesse Marcel was like, it was not of this earth. DuBose said that was a cover story from what we picked up in the desert. It was so highly classified, it was beyond anything. And why would they, you talk to the witnesses and they transported it under armed guards. Why would they transport a weather balloon under armed guard? Some of the aspects and threaten people's lives. And I don't know. The Roswell thing is, you listen to the people that were there and you put the pieces of the puzzle together. There's no one witness with a photograph that makes you go, okay, this is definitely alien. But if you put all the different various pieces of the puzzle together, it was something, in my opinion, that was truly extraordinary. And I was actually friends with Jesse Marcel's son, and who handled the debris when his dad came home, and he held it in his hands and he described that stuff that you could crumple up and it would regain its thing, and then these weird little I-beams with symbols on it. I mean, the guy saw it, unless he's lying, and his dad saw it. And honestly, there are still ranchers out there, I'm told, because I've talked to people when I was investigating the Socorro case that took place in Socorro, New Mexico. There's the plains of San Agustin and that whole area, and there are ranchers out there that apparently still have some of that debris.
Back to where we began with your latest film, Moment of Contact, new revelations of alien encounters. That's the Brazilian case.
Mm-hmm.
I came across another documentary about this. I think it was called Encounters. I think it was on Amazon Prime, where at the very end they interview some guy that says, "Oh yeah, I made that whole thing up. I got the kids all excited and they ran out, and I said, 'Look over there, there's the alien.' And they went, 'Oh, there's the alien.'" He didn't come off that credible to me either as an explanation, but I don't know if you encountered that guy or what you make of attempts to explain the Brazilian case.
Yeah, so it's funny. When I was doing Out of the Blue, which is my second documentary on UFOs, it was probably late 90s. I'm going to guess 99. And what I often do when I set out to make a new film is I always do sort of broad strokes, like, okay, I'm going to focus on this case, maybe the Phoenix Lights, maybe I'm going to do Bandwaters. This case in Tehran is pretty interesting, da, 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 da. And my new partner, Tim Coleman, and I had two, Boris Zuboff and Tim Coleman, British guy, very smart. And he was like, "Oh, mate, we got this case in Brazil with these live aliens, UFO crash, da, da, da." And I said to myself, I've clearly picked the wrong partner. This guy's out of his mind. If he thinks I'm wasting 1 second on that ridiculous case, he's got something else coming. So I was making my second film on UFOs, and I refused to even look. I wouldn't even read a paragraph on it. And I just looked at him like, "Don't ever bring that case. No." So I think that was 98. So 108. So in 2010, I think it was about 2010, I got invited, and I just finished a 2-hour special called I Know What I Saw. So I did Out of the Blue. Then I did another film called I Know What I Saw, and I didn't look into it, and I refused to look into it. And I get invited to Brazil, a place called Peruíbe, south of Sao Paulo, on the coast. And right before I was leaving, a buddy of mine who's been very influential and very helpful behind the scenes, he was a top executive in the entertainment industry, Jeff Sagansky. He's cool with me telling you that. And he goes, "Oh, James, you're going to Brazil. You got to look into that Brazil case." And I was like, "Oh my, no, please not this again." But I had a lot of respect for him because he was very influential. He helped me get meetings with the right people, and he's always been really good to me. And so I said, "Oh yeah, Jeff, yeah, sure. Yeah, no, excellent. Yeah, I'll definitely look into that when I go to Brazil. Okay, you take care now. Goodbye." Click. And I said to myself, I'm not wasting 1 second on that case. I arrive in Brazil, no intentions to look into it. And I meet up with one of the other people that was invited to the conference was Stanton Friedman. And the topic came up there. And he goes, "Yo, you haven't heard about it?" I was like, "Well, I've heard about it, but, I'm not going to waste any time on it." And he goes, "Well, not so fast, James. I can't remember what year it was that he had seen it. Maybe it was like 2002 that he was there, and he met with some of the witnesses, and he goes, "This could be the Roswell of Brazil. You might not be so dismissive. You should take a look." So based on that, extremely reluctantly, I opted to, okay, I'll start looking into it. And then, let's see, that was 2010, 2011, something like that, 2010. what was it, 2022 that we released Moment of Contact? What is that? How many years is that? 2012?
23.
Something like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. So
2010,
13 years. Yeah.
15 years. Um, yeah, and then and since then I've been back, I don't know, 4 times since that film's come out. Yeah, something like
So
that.
what convinced you there's something that really happened there, not just some social contagion or kids'
Yeah, yeah.
imagination?
This is something that didn't make it into the film, and it wouldn't because it's it doesn't matter. But the reason why I'm talking about it is because the Air Force, Brazilian Air Force General Jose Carlos Pereira, we met with, and he actually participated in willingly to talk about UFOs in Brazil. And he was like, look, I can talk about Ubatuba, I can talk about Colares in the 70s, I can talk about UFOs over, very similar to what happened in Washington, D.C. in 1952, happened over Sao Paulo State in 1986. UFOs, it was called UFOs over Brazil. He said, I'll talk about that. You mentioned Virginia, and this interview's terminated. That's odd. Wow. I can't even talk about it. Like, seriously? I was just baffled, and he was very serious, like not one word. And I thought that was really odd. It was like 2000, I'm going to have to guess 2012, 2013, something like that. We met with him twice. And at the end of the interview, Marco and I, we came up to him and we shut everything off. And I said, hey, I promise there's no recording devices on me. There's no cameras rolling. Please tell me, what do you know about Virginia, please? And he's getting his affairs in order to leave. He's got a driver waiting for him. And Marco's talking to him. He speaks broken English, but Marco's translating. We're both, I'm practically licking his boots. I'm really, please, just between us, I'm looking into his soul. Like, I just want to, please, and I follow him all the way back to his car. He's got his briefcase. He's got a driver waiting. He opens the door and he sits down in the back seat. And Marco and I were just like, please, General, please. It was almost comical. And he looks up at us, engine running, door open, driver sitting there behind the wheel, ready to go. And he goes, it happened. Closes his door, and off they went. Now, I know this doesn't mean anything to you or to anybody else, but personally for me, that kept me going. That was like, holy shit, maybe.
And by
maybe,
it happened, what's the it?
Yeah, well, that a UFO crash and that, the implications. Yeah.
And that young man that said he made it all up and orchestrated the social contagion with the kids, do you know him, or is he not?
Yeah, his name is, you mean the guy that's kind of deformed that they tried to say that it was, Mujahideen or something. I've seen him. Name. Yeah, he's there. He's still in Brazil. He's still there. You talk to, I've talked to so many people. I've talked to the surgeons, and I've talked to the military guys.
So this would not be something a single individual like that could orchestrate
to
convince all these different people.
Complex hoax in the history of hoax.
Okay.
And that's the
all
thing.
Right, since you mentioned Stan Friedman, who I knew and I liked him, and sadly we were supposed to do a public debate, and then he died.
Oh my gosh,
he had a cardiac arrest.
I have something I have to tell you about that.
Yeah.
Stanton called me. And this is to tell you how much work Stanton puts into everything he did. He called me up, and he goes, "Hey James, didn't you go on like Larry King or something with Michael Shermer, Skeptic magazine?" I said, "Yeah, I did a couple times, and we've been in touch over the years." And he goes, "Well, can you give me the link to all those?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Like, what's going on?" He goes, "Well, I'm actually going to debate him." And I was like, "Oh, interesting. When are you going to debate him?" He goes, "Next year." I said, "My Lord, you're a year out and you're already," he goes, "I'm going to watch everything he's ever done and I'm going to have an answer to everything." That's what he said to me. And I thought, that's what makes Stanton Friedman, because,
well, I bring him up because
the level of preparation that he was willing to invest.
Yeah. Well, he's the one that tracked down the Bob Lazar story because, as you know, people like Joe Rogan love to bring Bob Lazar on to talk about all the stuff he says he saw. And Friedman is the one that tracked down that he lied about his educational credentials. He's a graduate in physics from Caltech and MIT, didn't even attend either one. So I've talked to Joe about this. His explanation is they went in to erase his academic, credentials. Well, who's the they? Well, it's the generic they. I trust Stan on that, because he was pretty thorough about that.
Oh, he was so thorough.
Tracked down Lazar's actual academic credentials, which was Pierce College, a community college in Southern California that he went to, and so on. So anybody that would make up something like that can be easily checked, I just don't trust him when he says, and then I worked at Area 51 back engineering spaceships. I don't believe it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never delved. Actually, I think I mentioned it in my first film because at the time everybody was talking about it in the early 90s. And people have asked me all the time, like, what do you think about Lazar? I was like, well, what I believe is that he believes what he's saying. That's about as far as I can go. I have done zero research on his case. Absolutely zero. I can't.
What about another case? Lou Elizondo worked on ATIP, heading the ATIP program on UAPs, and then there's a bunch of stuff on Twitter like did he really? And then the Pentagon says no, he never worked on this, and then somebody else posts a letter from Senator Reid saying yeah, he did work on it. So I don't know what to believe now.
Well, Senator Reid backed up that Lou was part of the program, no question. But, Jay Stratton, who was head of DIA, I think 16 years investigated. It was OSAP, and then it rolled into ATIP. But Jay Stratton, I think, was at the top. I'm not sure exactly what role Lou had at it, but I trust Christopher Mellon, and obviously Leslie Kean looked into it, and apparently the level of rigor that the New York Times put everyone through just to kind of the vetting process she said it was nearly impossible to get that story, to print. And I met with Senator Harry Reid, and he confirmed that, yeah, the program was real and Lou was part of it. So, here's the thing. Whether you believe Lou or not, whether you believe Jay or not, in my humble opinion, I think that we should, as civilians, rattle the cages of our elected officials, provide immunity, and create an environment to allow them to reveal the details needed to verify these extraordinary claims. Like, we owe it to ourselves, because you've got people that are delivering the daily brief to the President of the United States, making these claims like that we've got this program, we've got this crash retrieval stuff.
Yeah, I will admit, people like Grush and David Fravor, Alex, the other pilot, Alex Diedrich, I think.
Yeah, compelling.
And then who was the other UAP pilot that's been?
Well, there was Ryan Graves, but I don't think he was.
Ryan Graves, yeah, they come off incredibly credible. I mean, just like honest, accurate, doing the best they can.
Yeah,
they don't seem to be hustling anything. And so, yeah, damn it, come on, let's get to the bottom of it.
But that's the thing.
It's so frustrating.
It is, and I'm frustrated. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm incredibly frustrated, and I understand the level of skepticism on this case that I'm reporting on, Moment of Contact. I mean, I don't blame anybody for looking at me like I'm crazy. I don't. I was there. I get it, and I can't say what it was. I could probably tell you what I don't think it was, but what it wasn't. Sorry, but I don't know.
That's the problem. It's almost like proving a negative. No matter how many people, you could be Marco Rubio that said, I looked into it, I didn't find anything. Then you could just say, well, he's not in the loop. He doesn't know about that secret program.
In other words, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Well, no.
Well, it's just what would it take to finally get an answer?
That's
Short of here it is. Here's Marco, and he's in the hangar with the spaceship, and he's in there with a film crew. CBS News, here it is.
This is what I wanted to ask you about. Like, let's just say you've seen Moment of Contact, the new revelations of alien encounters, right? You've seen it?
Yeah.
So let's just say I've got a pretty good idea that there was photographic evidence taken, not just by the doctors, but by military, firemen, and the military crash recovery, firemen, police department. I interviewed the chief of police. He told me there was definitely photographic evidence. He at one point had a photograph, according to. Let's just say that I got my hands on one of those. Okay, maybe a little video shot in 1996. And I have it analyzed, and it seems to be, all the specialists say, yeah, this checks out. And I put it in the movie. Now I've got all this testimony, and I've got coupled that with video footage. Like, would that make a difference? or would people just
Would
go,
that make a difference?
"That's-"
Yes, it would nudge my Bayesian priors up toward
Yeah.
a higher credence for sure.
Yeah.
But because this is such an extraordinary claim, I mean, again, we've agreed this would be the most spectacular discovery in human history. You know, the evidence really does need to be commensurate with that as extraordinary evidence. And so even though I wouldn't have to see it with my own eyes, you know, it's like I never saw the Chinese spy balloon, but I believe it's real because it was covered on all the networks, you know, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Pentagon,
Right.
the president, and we all saw the videos on the news. There's the debris that they shot it down and so on. It's like I don't have to see it with my own eyes, but yeah, okay, the Chinese spy balloon, that was real. We don't need to know the credentials of the pilots who shot it down, whatever. It's real, right? So something like that. This is my bet with Avi Loeb, our $1,000 bet. That and whoever wins, the money goes to the Galileo project. So no big deal. But there we agreed that 2 of the 3 major scientific institutions, so NASA, National Academy of Science, and the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, 2 of the 3 would have to say yes, we have made contact with extraterrestrials. Here is the disclosure, from the government, or here is the, Oumuamua or 3-Eye Atlas. And NASA said, yeah, 3-Eye Atlas was definitely not a comet. It was definitely a technology, something like that, then he would win. And I would concur. Yeah. Okay. That's it. I agree.
Yeah. I was talking with individuals in Washington, D.C. about the complexities of disclosure. And whether you believe it's real or that we have debris and bodies, let's just imagine for a moment that it were true, right? And it's interesting to think about it. Like I said, again, hypothetical, okay? It's real. We got crash recovered materials. We know that the observed technology is light years advanced if the accounts are true, right? And all the sensory data is the observed technology, if you could weaponize that, or if somebody else might weaponize that, that could be an issue of national security, right? So you wouldn't want that technology to fall in the wrong hands. If you could put a nuclear bomb on that technology, like let's just say the Tic Tac, for instance, Dave Fravor and everybody else talks about. I mean, my gosh, flies the rings around our fastest jets and goes from standstill to out of sight in the blink of an eye. I mean, that's extraordinary. That's a potential. I mean, I personally wouldn't want that to get in the hands of the wrong people. I wouldn't, if that's the case, right? Okay, well, let's say they have biologics. So maybe we make a plea to the government. All right, we understand that the technology is going to have to remain an issue of national security because we don't want it to fall into the wrong hands, But what about the biologics? Is that national security? Don't we have the right to know if that's true? As being human beings, the human race should be entitled to that information. So maybe we focus on that aspect and we push the government, the executive branch, like if this is true, at least provide like why can't we disagree on the fact that all right, the technology is going to be classified, you guys are never going to give it up. You could be an admission that we have it or not, I don't know. And maybe we focus on the biologics. It's much more complicated than you'd think, right?
Yes,
and this is
certainly. Well, biologics, if it was biological extraterrestrial and it didn't have DNA, like all life on Earth has, then that would be a sign that's not from this planet.
Right. Yeah.
That would be a good test. That's actually Paul Davies' second Genesis search, that if he can find here on Earth a form of life that doesn't have DNA, that would be an idea that there was another Genesis, another start of life, or panspermia was planted here by aliens or whatever. Anyway, how are you going to top these great films you've made? What's next? I mean, are there other big incidences you're tracking down?
I'm doing an event in Washington, D.C. That's all I can say right now.
Oh.
I'll be making a big announcement.
Oh, yeah. My gosh. You mean a disclosure kind of event?
Well, it's an event. It's an event.
This is in January?
I've been working on it for 9 months. Yeah.
Oh, well, good. All right. Well, then if it happens, then you're coming back.
I will let's put it this way. I will put out a press release and I'll invite you to it. How's that?
Oh, I would love that. I would come. I'll go. Yeah. All right, James, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. This was great. Let's keep the conversation open.
I appreciate the civility and the spirited debate. I think it's awesome.
Of course. I hope you're right. I hope Avi Loeb wins his bet against me. It would be great.